Alright, so this is going to be a video probably a lot of people are not going to like, but I promise transparency, and that's what you're going to get. Let's go.
So good.
Alright squad, so this is once again the 2021 Chormag Stylus, size large, 27.5, 64 degree head angle, nice short 419 chain stays, chromoly frame, downhill sleigh machine. Alright, my reviews on this, I've ridden this a ton in the last couple days, last 3-4 week, we'll just say. I've ridden this a ton, a lot. On flowy trails, on burly trails, on climbing trails, and on super steep gnar. So I feel like I have a good idea of this bike, and this is my personal opinion on this bike. We'll start with the goods on this bike. So good things about this bike are the geo numbers, like the slackness and the length of the bike. This bike is probably the most stable hardtail I've ever ridden on the downhill chunk. Like it wants to go straight, it wants to plow the chunder. Like it is very, very, very composed on the downhill trails. The chunkier it gets, the more composed it is. Very, very impressed with that. I would say this would literally be the equivalent of a downhill bike in hardtail form. So if that's what you're looking for, this bike is probably what you're after. Another really good pro on this bike is the dampening properties. Now, people say supple, and I don't like that because I feel like that's misleading when you say a hardtail is supple. I would say no hardtail is supple. So I feel like that word should be just vanquished from the vocabulary. Now, one thing I do think it is it dampens vibrations. And I think that's solely due with just the mass and density of the frame. I actually don't think that has anything to do with it actually being steel. I think it just has to do with it being a big, heavy, dense frame. If you were to take, like, I don't know, a vibrating toothbrush, and you were to hold it against a hollow aluminum frame, you would physically be able to hear and feel that whole frame resonate and vibrate because it's a light material, it's not a very dense material. If you took that same vibrating toothbrush and you held it against any steel frame that is much heavier and much more dense, it's gonna deaden the vibrations, which is like, it's not a bad feature about steel or any heavier bike. It's just the quality you're going to get by having a heavier, more dense bike, regardless of steel, whatever. So you can take that for what it is. It being denser is, yeah, it's like, I've noticed it on the climbs especially. As I go over bumps and like chattery rocks, I don't feel it in my taint as much. Like it definitely calms that down. So if that's an issue you've had on bikes, this frame particularly in chromoly is definitely going to satisfy that need. Another plus of having this bike is just the overall like reach in that is definitely very confidence inspiring. It puts you in a decent body position, and those short chain stays do still make a bike of this length still feel relatively playful considering the length of the bike and the weight of the bike. Those chain stays really come into play quite nicely, giving it more of a nimble feel than I think the bike actually is. So yeah, like it's not bad. If you're looking for a sleigh machine, a bike to actually plow and still want a hardtail, this is your bike. Now on to the cons. So, and a lot of these cons kind of threw me for a loop when it came for this bike. So the first con is going to be the most obvious. This bike is heavy. This bike is really heavy, like uncomfortably heavy. So the frame itself is heavy, but the thing is though, I already have a decently heavy build, like with especially like the NX cassette, fully made out of steel. Like that's a pretty heavy cassette on top of this steel frame. You know, big 2.6 inch tires, with decent casings and a DH casing on the rear and a 38 fork on the front. It's a heavy build. This bike is as heavy as my DH bike. To give you an idea, I don't have exact numbers, but she's heavy, really heavy. And you notice that on the downs, on a good and a bad note. So on a plus side, it being heavy makes it feel very, very planted and very, very composed on the downs. And that's a good thing. But on the downside is it's not anything close to as nimble as, you know, my Meta on the downs. So, you know, you take that for what it is. If you want a planted ride, a more stable ride, this is your bike. If you want more of a nimble, playful, ha-ha ride, the something more like the Meta and the Alloy is definitely going to be a better bike, in my opinion. My word means nothing. I'm literally just giving you my personal thoughts, so I don't want people to be taking things personally or whatever about my thoughts. The other thing that I found with this bike is it climbs like shit. Like it is the worst climbing bike, at least in this configuration, with the 170, the 2.6s, maybe the NX cassette and a steel frame. This is the worst climbing bike I've ever owned. Out of all my hardtails or my full suspensions coming from, like, I used to have a 29er Evil Reckoning with a 174 up front, 160 in the rear, dual 2.5 DH casing tires that I used to race. That climbed better than this. My Nomad climbed better than this. And then obviously my Meta climbed better than this as well. Shit, my Da Vinci Spartan, like the old one, climbed better than this. This is not a good climbing bike. It's okay on the punchy stuff mid-trail, but like if you're gonna like do decent climbs, it's heavy, man. You feel it. It feels like someone's dragging you back. So, and that's not something I really even look for in a bike or even care about in a bike. Like, I typically don't, like, when people say something climbs good or bad, I'm like, whatever. I don't really care. Like, as long as it gets me up to the top of the hill, I'm cool. But like on my like local, which would be like from, I do like a good road climb, and then I do a gravel climb, and then I do a good road climb. I almost felt like getting off the bike and pushing at one point. Like, I haven't felt that way in probably 6 years. So that was pretty surprising to me. So that weight definitely has a play in my circumstances on the climb, and I did not like that at all. That's almost a make or break right there. The other place where the weight kind of, well, the weight and the overall length of the bike, because it's a pretty long wheelbase. The length and the weight on the bike going down. So it makes it very, very stable, and that's awesome. And planted, awesome, not nimble. It's like in the tight stuff, quick little, you know, maybe little nose pegs or, nose picks or any little tight stuff. It's awkward. Like it's not as nimble as, we'll say, the Meta. And the last thing, or actually there's two more things I don't really like about this bike. So the next thing is, as much as I love how small this steer, like the head is right here, it's so short. I had a 7 3/4 inch steer tube. I still have a stack on here, decent amount, and I had to cut down my steer tube like another 1.5 inches to have it just with this stack, and like basically know the bike's gonna fit that. So basically, if I switch this bike to any other bike, I'm basically gonna have to put a new steer tube in or a new set of uppers to have it fit any other bike. And that also brings me to the front end's slacked out to 64, and you're also stretched out farther, but that's also bringing me down another 1.5 inches. So you find yourself really over top of the bike and down, which is okay on like just general riding, but like when you're in the steeps, that just puts even more of your weight over the front, regardless of that 64-degree head angle. Some people may like that, some people may not like that. I can't say it's a good or bad thing. That's a personal preference. I don't know. Like I hated it when I first started riding it, but like I kind of came around to it. So take it for what you want. So the last thing that I really dislike about this bike is This is the Chormag. It's a Stylus. It's a new modern bike. Awesome, rad, sweet. Chormag's always been awesome for like kind of keeping the blueprints open on their frames for you to kind of run whatever you want. Mullet, plus tires, whatever. And like that's super rad. And I like that about their mentality. What I was not expecting is I run Bontrager Line 40 rims. So that's about a 37 internal width, 40 mil external width. I run 2.6 tires, so like that's a butcher on the rear. I literally, I'm not gonna bring the camera over, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I literally have maybe 2 millimeters of clearance between my tire and my chain stays. And I've already worn in probably, I don't know, 8-9 rides, I've already worn away the paint on that inner chain stay. And that sucks for a frame that's, you know, closer to $1,000 and it's supposed to be super burly. So that really, really sucks. So if you're looking to run like 3.0s on here or something like that with a wider rim, it ain't gonna happen. Like you're basically stuck at 2.6 with like a 30 mil rim or like a 2.5 on a wider mil rim. So that's something to keep in mind when you're buying this. One other thing too that I found is, on no other bike, I found that I've never picked up more rocks in my chain and oh my gosh, my drive gear, or well, I can't find the words right now. My dear Lord, my chain ring. Sorry, I've never picked up more rocks in my chain ring ever before in my life, and I'm not sure why that is. But like as I'm riding, climbing, whatever, I always seem to get rocks caught in my chain ring on this bike, and I can't figure out why. So that's a bit odd to me, but I don't think it's a bad bike. So basically, here's my final thoughts on this bike. If you're looking for a bike to plow the downs, and like that's your main focus, and you want a hardtail or like a hardcore hardtail, and you're all about like having something super badass, super robust, super planted, tracks really well, and really easy on the legs, this is a fantastic bike. But it's not necessarily what I'm looking for. The reason I got into wanting to ride hardtails again is because I wanted that fun factor back. I wanted that playful, nimble, laughable mentality of riding a bike. And I feel this is kind of going the opposite direction of my initial intent. So basically, I find it easier to take a really nimble bike like the Meta and make it a little bit more hardcore versus taking a really gnarly hardcore burly frame and trying to make it nimble. That's my words of advice when it comes to this. And that being said, I'm probably going to end up selling this frame. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for it. And I'm 100% going back to the Meta. I can't wait to get back on that frame. If anything, it's reignited my love for the Meta frame, and I'm stoked to rebuild it up. I'm sure this is a bit of a complete curveball to all of you, but I'm me, being totally transparent with no biased input whatsoever. I tell you how I like it. It might be that inner hockey player in me. As a hockey player, you tend to, like, when you find something you like, you don't want to stray away from it. And maybe that's the Meta, but like these are just my feelings, how I feel. I feel I can get away with riding the Meta on as chunky stuff as I want before needing to switch over to a DH bike. Where with this, I feel like I'd take away too much of the fun nimbleness that I'm looking for in a hardtail. So hopefully nobody gets too butthurt on this review, and I'm looking forward to rebuilding up the Meta. And until next time, positive vibes, gnarly rides. I'll see you in the next one. You.